You're listening to the Christian Indie Artists and Songwriters Podcast, the place where faith, music, and life intersect. We exist to help Christian indie artists and songwriters just like you get songs heard. All right, I'm here with my friend Micah McCaw, coming to us live from Oregon. How you doing tonight, Micah?
I'm doing lovely tonight.
Awesome, man. Well, we just discovered that we are literally on the opposite side of the country. Literally, probably almost couldn't be further away from each other unless we were like in Alaska. But, you know, that's amazing that we are connected and we are here tonight. With that in mind, like, how did you kind of get into music? Where did your journey start as a Christian indie artist?
I started playing guitar when I was 7, because when I was very, very young, I heard Elvis Presley's Blue Suede Shoes on the radio, and I thought, that is what I would like to do. And then I kept on doing that, kept on playing. You know, I almost quit one time, and that memory haunts me when I think about it. But as I got through high school, I joined this band called Seons, and we were this indie rock band, and we put out an album in, I think, 2013. Then I put out my first solo album in 2014. And ever since then, I've been consistently doing as much as I can in regards to whatever that may showcase itself as. But it's led up to this year that I released my second full-length album that I'm super excited and still happy about, even though I can't do any touring off of it.
Has the whole pandemic affected you as far as like touring and live shows and bands and stuff in general? Has that been a big hindrance for you?
It both has and it hasn't. And right up front, I'll say I am very sympathetic to what is going on and how it's affecting people's lives. And I think it's horrible and it's pretty scary, I would say.
Yeah.
But I was at this point where I was getting ready to play my release show, and my bass player and drummer were not going to be able to tour, just because of work schedules and stuff. And so I was getting, frankly, very, very depressed. And I was like, what am I going to do? Like, this isn't working. I don't know how to swing this. And then literally March 13th, my album came out. And then March 16th, I believe, Kate Brown, our governor, said it's stay-at-home mandate. Wow. And so I had no shows booked. And so it has been nice, like, focusing on different aspects of music instead of touring, although I purposely made the album to be performed live, so that's been kind of strange. But
yeah,
what do you do, you know?
Yeah, you just got to roll with it. So with that in mind, so that's interesting. So as far as creating it to be played live, like, what do you mean by that exactly? Like, what was your intentionality with that?
I think my first album, if you were to listen to it, it's called Till Life Turns Over, and it is much more in the like singer-songwriter realm, which I love and is a great genre. But this album, I was just thinking, you know, I really would like to make a rock record. I want to make something that is like, it's super fun to play live, and I'm doing, you know, kind of crazy stuff on guitar, and we can play loud and be wild.
Awesome.
That was the intent behind the album. And some of the songs, not all of them, but a couple of them were a little older, and they had been performed live, and when played live, they would get a response from the audience that was exciting. So I wanted to kind of play on that and make it like, what if every song was that?
Yeah, cool. So like, what are some influences for you personally, but then also like behind the album? Because for some reason I keep thinking like John Mark McMillan keeps coming to mind. So is it any, like, what kind of sound would you describe this project as?
I would say more actually in line with Mute Math was a huge influence on the album. Cool. A couple of songs have some Radiohead-esque kind of material on them.
Okay.
Everybody says that, though, but I mean, that was the sound we were looking for. Switchfoot's like my all-time favorite band, so that's definitely in there. Oh, there is a bit of a Sufjan Stevens-y kind of vibe as well.
Cool. Well, that's awesome. So you kind of grew up, the Elvis Presley Blue Suede Shoes sort of started it for you, and then sounds like you just dug into guitar, and then that kind of led you into just recording and doing that thing, and then you came into an album this year. So that kind of brings us into like now, but what's something kind of along your journey that's that kind of brought you into wanting to do this, to kind of taking it from your love of guitar and playing guitar to kind of making it more of like a focus for you, to where you're like, hey, I really want to do this. I really want to make this work. So what was kind of some steps on your journey that brought you to that point?
Oh man, that is actually a tricky question, because I can't really recall not wanting to do it. I mean, I would say mostly because of Jurassic Park and Indiana Jones. I did have a stint when I was very, very young that I wanted to be a paleontologist, but that didn't last super long. But yeah, I think just continuing to learn about guitar slowly, playing at like talent shows at school and stuff like that, and kind of, getting the itch from that. And then also going from that to playing in this band when I was in high school, and we played when I got out of high school as well. It all just kind of kept fueling it. And it was a matter of like the dream becoming more and more realistic, instead of, when I was a kid, it was like, oh yeah, for sure, I'm going to be like selling out stadiums,
Right. Yeah,
that's like what you always think, because you don't know anything about music at the time. And then the older you get, the more it's like, well, that's not even something I necessarily want anymore,
Yeah. So talk about that a little bit, like going from that, the dream where like an A&R is going to walk by and hear you play in your room and be like, hey, you're the guy we've been looking for our whole lives.
Yeah.
Like, that's what we all think. That's the dream, but like, so how have you kind of navigated that as you've had some experiences, and like, as far as like, what does that look like? Because that's a really cool, I think, window into, you actually pursuing this thing at like Rock Band and doing it now, but with, I don't want to say this in a bad way, but more of like a realistic view. Like how have you kind of navigated that? Like, what are some things you've done, strategies you've done to kind of keep that going?
Oh yeah. This I would say is the constant struggle and battle. And this might be a long answer, so I hope you're strapped in.
I'm ready, man.
And not to be like too plug heavy or anything, but I do have a song on my new album called Talk Louder. And it is about this very thing we're discussing, where the first verse, I'm talking about how I would like to be successful, and I'd like to have money and have a house and do all of these things. And then the second verse, I go, but wasn't Jesus poor? Why do I pray for more? Like, why am I so concerned about that stuff? And the song ends on a resolve of like, I don't understand even what I'm trying to tell myself to do. So I just want you to talk louder than me so that I can hear what you want from me. So all of that to say, it is a constant struggle, because when you grow up, I'm 26, so I grew up kind of as the record label was already kind of dying. And before the streaming boom is now where it's at. I think the expectation does have to change, because it isn't, and I don't know if it ever was this way, but it isn't that thing you described where someone like hears you and they're like, I got it. This is the kid. We've been searching for him forever. And we're going to give him $2 million to make an album. It's like, no, I have to figure out how to make an album with like no money or with like a couple $1,000s. I'm thinking about this a lot actually this week. This is just such a huge topic, but I love it.
Oh, yeah, me too, man. I'm excited to hear, your thoughts, since you're really doing this. So this is great.
So this is maybe a good analogy. We'll see. Yesterday was my wife and I's anniversary.
Oh, happy anniversary.
Thank you. And we got a nice bottle of wine, and it was by Francis Ford Coppola. And he, if you don't know, is the guy who directed The Godfather and The Godfather 2 and The Godfather 3. Apocalypse Now, a legend. And I was looking at the bottle of wine, and I'm like, here's a guy who's directed some would argue the greatest movies ever made. So he's like done the world's version of success. Instead of continuing to make movies, and I don't know his life story, maybe he's not able to do that right now, but he's making wine. So he found like a new passion that he really likes. And I was just thinking about that. It's like we put so much stock into getting to like X place. Mm-hmm. And even the people who are at that spot, they're like, oh yeah, I'm already here, but I'm kind of done with this. Or I actually enjoyed the climb rather than this actual pinnacle that I'm at. I don't know if that's eloquent, but that's been playing in my mind, the fulfillment comes from the doing, not where it puts you monetarily or like how many Instagram fans or followers you have. That's not the thing that gives you fulfillment, I don't think.
Man. No, that's good. I've been thinking about that. I was talking about with my wife as well. And like, it's almost the kind of thing where like things seem more appealing sometimes when you're not too close to it. It's like the allure of the unknown in a way.
Yeah.
You know, everybody kind of wants that, like the rock star dream, because, you know, that's like the big house and, you know, all the cliches and things. But I feel like when you get too close to something or actually get that thing, then you're like, you see it for what it really is. And you're like, oh, this is not nearly what I thought it was. So it's like, there's like a safety and distance sometimes, which that's the journey, right? Is like kind of trying to move towards it. But just like, that's a great analogy with the Francis, that bottle of wine, because like, you know, he might have had a passion. For all we know, he could have been passionate about wine long before directing movies. And the
Right.
movies is what actually financed him to be able to do that, because he probably like owns a vineyard or something at this point, you know? So like, that's really cool that his passion kind of came around later, but it wasn't the thing that we would necessarily think. So what are some strategies and things that you've been kind of putting into practice to kind of keep that excitement going on this sort of like modified version of like what you initially kind of were after, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I think there is an element of I can be fairly one-tracked mind. So sometimes I even need to kind of pull back, because I might go, oh, I'm going to do, say, I don't know, I cover this song or something, and I do it, or I'm working on it, and then I'm listening to it, and I'm going, I just did this to do something. I'm not actually passionate about what I did. So I don't think that answers your question, but that is something.
Yeah. No, it's the passion is the fuel, right?
Yeah.
For it all. And like, I feel like, I don't know, this is not necessarily like biblically sound. I mean, I think it is, but I feel like what is passion? Like it's some internal thing that gasses us up, makes us feel like alive. So I have to think that is God given, because what else could it be? Like, and beyond, even deeper than that, I feel like that is the thing that pushes us into our calling and why we're actually here, because like we all have different passions. I mean, some of us are the same, but even if they're the same lane, like there's still maybe a different side of it. So like, I think chasing the passion aspect, if we put it through the right lens, like really that's what's bringing us closer to God. Because when we feel like when you're doing something that you really love, like you are super excited about it, and no one has to be around you to feel that excitement. You know, it's like, it just like lights your soul up, you know? So I have to think that that's the kind of thing that God has in us to keep us moving towards, him in our calling, and ultimately sharing his goodness through whatever that spark is, right?
Yeah. And you know, I haven't actually talked too much about the faith aspect, but there is definitely, you know, I pray about it all the time. That it's that kind of like, you know, I pray that I can be successful, that I could, you know, get to a point where I could support my family, and like it would only be music or just art in general, some, you know, in that realm. But, you know, I hate to say it, but your will be done, not mine. You know, it's like I don't even want to say that part of the prayer.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always the but at the end, like,
yeah, because
like
you do see God moving, and sometimes you might have, I mean, I can't think of any examples right now, but maybe you have a show and someone talks to you afterward and you have a really meaningful connection, or you have like, you talk about some interesting stuff about faith or something. And if you were in a stadium playing to millions of, you know, hundreds of thousands of people, maybe you would not be able to connect with this person. We don't have the zoom out lens that God does, and we don't know, just being faithful to the kingdom, what that does. We don't see the ripple effects necessarily, and we have to kind of accept that, unfortunately.
Yeah, we are in the forest. We can't help it because we get things in such small doses every day. We may not have anything significant, seemingly significant happen, but in the grand scheme, the narrative of our whole lives, like there's so many things that like impact the world for God. So that's the thing. It's like you said, that's a great example of like, you might play a show and the show might have like sucked, like, oh man,
Yeah.
I was sick or whatever, but then you talk to somebody and have a real conversation. It's like, man, like that's a part of why we're even doing this in the first place, So
Yeah.
it's like God does those things to kind of, I think, stoke the passion,
I think something that pops into my head a lot, and I'm just gonna, and this is probably not my thought. I don't think I'm smart enough to think this thought. I often think, what is the possibility that God is protecting me from something that I would not be able to handle if I was at those levels that I think I should be at? Like maybe I would be susceptible to becoming a drug addict under the pressure. And I don't know that about myself now because I'm not in that situation. And it seems easy to say, no, I don't want to have drugs right now. But maybe when I have a pressure of all of this craziness, when you are at a higher level, maybe I'm the kind of person that would buckle and I just have no idea that I'm that kind of person. Or maybe it'd rip apart my marriage and that's not worth it.
Right, man. That's so true because unfortunately, like that is a extremely common story.
Absolutely.
People get to these crazy heights that like so many people kind of covet and want. And then like you just hear, I mean, honestly, most of the time, unfortunately, you hear like their life kind of falls apart. Their marriage ends or something happens. It makes you wonder, like, is it natural for man to even get to that level? Because it doesn't seem to go well.
No, I mean, I don't think we are cut out mentally as humans to do that.
Yeah, not to that like God like when people look at you as if you're God because you're so, and the thing is it's silly because it's all about like your pop songs. Like that doesn't make you like a God among men. Like it's just music or fashion or something. It's so silly. Or even like we talked about like making movies and something like that. That's just a skill, and a lot of people enjoy that because I've heard like the amount of success you have in your life is directly correlated to the amount of people that you like impact or influence. Like, so really success, of course, I mean, I would definitely say that would be a worldly definition of success in most cases, but like, your audience, essentially your audience determines the amount of success you have. And it's just a matter of like mere numbers. Like, that's why all the songs that are terrible, they're on the radio, they're still hits because they just have such a huge, if 500,000 people or not even that, 10 million people hear a song and only half of them like it, that's still 5 million people, but for us, we may never even get to have that many people hear our music. So like the sphere of influence is just different, it's just a different scale. But man, I think that that's really important. And I'm glad that you kind of brought that up, that the idea that like, ultimately like God, if we are doing this for God, which this podcast is called the Christian Indie Artists and Songwriters. So we are doing that for God. Like it's those moments, those conversations with those people after a show or after, or a DM message on social media that is actually kingdom building more so. I mean, it's all a matter of the heart, right? I mean, you can have 100,000 followers on Facebook and still be an amazing Christian. It's just a matter of the heart, but keeping those things in perspective, I think is really, really good. So I'm super glad you brought that up, man.
And for any of the fellow musicians, these are things that I think about and then I immediately forget for several weeks and get very depressed about music. So it's not pursuit. Like, it's not like, oh, it's fixed. Like, for example, right now I'm in a place where like the past couple of weeks, I've felt pretty fulfilled with my artistic endeavors, and I've been having a really joyful time. But I mean, earlier this year, I was like, maybe this should be the hanging up of the hat because it just doesn't seem to be going anywhere because I can't see the roots that are going places, they're under the ground. So
it just kind of goes both ways. Like one of the pivotal equations I say for our business is patience plus perseverance equals success. And I just feel like it's the ability to be okay with the waiting and persevere through it, because we definitely, sometimes it's so much easier to just stop, because then you wonder, like, would anyone even notice if I stopped? Like, that's where it gets kind of dangerous, But I think that if we're doing it for God, and of course, not even in a cliche way, but like if we're doing it for God, like really doing it for God, then like that has to be enough. And the rest of it will ebb and flow because we're human, we're emotional beings. So, it can get tough. But like, I think doing it for God is enough, because if the passion's there, I mean, I don't know if it's the same for you, but I'm assuming it is. Like, it doesn't really matter if you're doing it or not. You still think about it. You still want to do it. And it still makes you feel like you're actually alive when you do it. And I don't think that'll ever kind of go. I don't think that dries up if it's a real passion from the Lord. One thing I always like to ask people too is like, any advice you'd give to the younger Micah, or even, I mean, I know we kind of covered a lot of stuff here, which is great, but like, what's something that you tell your younger self, maybe as you're kind of going through those tougher seasons or whatever it might be, that just could encourage our audience and just in general, like your younger self, man?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think I would probably tell myself the fulfillment and the joy is in the doing, and that feeling of accomplishment. You don't know where it's going to go, and be okay to change your expectations, I guess, because there is that side of my brain sometimes when I go, maybe I wanted, this goal to happen, goal A, and I don't even get close to goal A. And so I think, oh man, my expectations should be different. And then I feel guilty, like, well, but you got to work harder and stuff. And sometimes you don't have control over all of your circumstances. And it's okay to be like, I still would like goal A, but I hate to use the word settle, because that's not what I mean. I don't even know where I'm going with this, but I just think there's room to change your perspective, I guess, on what you're doing. Because, the other thing I think about, and I guess I've kind of abandoned my younger self. I've just left him over there, and he doesn't know what I'm talking about anymore.
He's just practicing blue suede shoes right now. It's fine.
Yeah, but I went on this tour with my band Seons in 2016, and me and my best friend, like they were my best, all of them were my best friends, but the guy who became the best man at my wedding and all that, him and we booked almost all of the shows. It was all across the U.S. We made it all the way to the East Coast, and we came back, and it was not as big of a tour as Switchfoot would go on. It was totally DIY. Mm-hmm. We did the best we can. And I look back at that tour, and those are some of the fondest memories I have. And I don't know if I will ever have as fond of memories as those. And yet it was not to go back to what I was saying, the A goal was not the goal I was trying to reach. It was much lower than that goal in terms of like how the world would see it. And yet I cherish that so much. And if I could do it again in a heartbeat, I would do it.
Wow. It's like the word that came to mind is like being flexible in the calling, like
I like that.
It's not going to go. And the thing it's something that I've definitely worked through a lot too, is like, if it goes exactly the way that we think it will, then that means God has nothing to do with it, because that's just what our mind dreamed up and what we like muscled our way into. So honestly, like, even though it's a really difficult discipline, like I look forward to things not going the way I want them to, because that means that God is probably doing something much better. And like you said, like from the world's point of view, you probably didn't walk away with $100,000 from your tour, but you walked away with literal memories that you will cherish for the rest of your life, which is way better than money. Because I've always heard it said, like, when people are on their deathbed, they don't wish for more money, they wish for more time. Yeah. And the memories are what fills that time. So like, those are the things that actually matter. And the ministry that you guys did on that tour was probably amazing. And that's why it's so pivotal to you and your journey, and probably one of those things that keeps you moving forward, because it was so great. So that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Definitely before we go, I want you to just tell people, like, what's the best way that they can connect with you? What social media sites or your jam or website or anything you want people to check out? I mean, I'll link it all in the notes and stuff, but just let them hear from you. Yeah.
Yeah. if you like indie rock, or if you like a person who just rants about movies all the time, I think I'm your guy. You can follow me on Instagram at out_of_Micah, out of Micah. I'm also on Facebook as my name. I'm most active on Instagram, and I have a Twitter as well. But again, most active on Instagram. And then, yeah, listen to my newest album. It's called Imbalances. It's on all of the things. My name is the artist name, and then the album's called Imbalances. And if you do listen to it, I would love to hear from you. It would be cool to know, like, oh, I was listening to Brian's podcast and I found you. I mean, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
And also, finally, if I'm going to be extra pluggy, I do have a movie podcast called the McCaw Podcast Universe, and we cover film franchises. And if you like that, you should listen to it.
Well, I'm going to listen to it for sure because I need to learn more. I love movies. I don't watch them as much as I want to these days, but I am a fan, so I'm going to check it out for sure. So I hope that anyone listening does too. And yeah, and last thing too is I always like to pray over guests because I think that's important. So God, thank you so much for Micah. Thank you so much for him sharing his heart and being vulnerable, and just this is a great conversation about you, and we just thank you for the provision and the creativity and the motivation and the grit that you've put in him to continue to chase after this music dream, even if it's changed shape over time. God, we just pray for extra motivation and inspiration again that just fills him up with the things that he's doing, and let him recognize you along the way. And like he said so intelligently, that the journey is really, the joy is found in the journey. It's not really the arrival. It's more about the steps that it takes to get there. So as he continues to do that, God, just lead and guide every step. Let him see you on the journey, Lord. And we just thank you for him, and just bless him and his wife as they just celebrated their anniversary. Just let them have an awesome, the best year of marriage yet, God. We just thank you for all these things. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
We want to help reach as many Christian indie artists and songwriters as possible, and one way we can do that is with your help. So if you could take a minute and leave us a review on iTunes, that would be so appreciated. This is how the iTunes algorithm will push this content out to more and more Christian indie artists and songwriters. So like I said, if you could just take a couple seconds, leave us a review, that would be so awesome, means so much to us, and we would really appreciate it.